Hi, everyone. My name is Alex. I'm the digital editor at Canadian Geographic, and I'm here with cave diver extraordinaire Jill Heinerth. We're super excited. This is our first ever virtual CanGeo talk, and we're so glad that you could be here with us, Jill. Um, we've also got our social media editor, Angelica Haggart, helping out behind the scenes. She's going to be watching the comments in the YouTube chat. So if you have a question for Jill based on her presentation, you can ask it in the comments and we'll try to get to that at the end. We normally do these CanGeo talks in the theater at our beautiful headquarters in Ottawa. And we don't know when the next time we're going to be able to do that is, but we hope that in the future, if your travels bring you to Ottawa or you live in the capital, that you'll check it out and drop by 50 Sussex and come pay us a visit and attend one of our future events. I also want to just say that, you know, we couldn't do these kinds of things without the support of our readers and our fellows. And so if you like what you're hearing tonight, please consider making a donation to the Royal Canadian Geographical Society. Any contribution that you can make will help us keep our educational program going during this challenging time and to keep putting on exciting events like these. And if you are super into, you know, your virtual nightlife, we have a really exciting event coming up on Tuesday next week. We're going to be hosting our first ever trivia night. And you can find more details about that on our Facebook page, which is Canadian Geographic. And then continuing with this series of CanGeo Talks, we're going to be hearing next from explorer Ray Zahab. That's going to be taking place on May 14th at 7 p.m. So check out our website. We have all of the details on our upcoming events there. And I'm just going to turn it over to Jill. I'm sure many of you, if you've been a reader of ours for a while or have been following our other events, you'll know Jill. She is an amazing explorer, an advocate for planet Earth. She's dived in some incredible places, including flooded mine shafts, oases in the Sahara Desert, an iceberg in Antarctica. But tonight I understand that she's going to talk about a project that she's undertaken a little bit closer to home. So I'll turn it over to Jill. We're super thrilled that you could be here.
Awesome. It's great to be here with you all. I'm going to share with you some of the incredible wonders that we have here in Canada. And I'm just going to share my screen so you don't have to look at me. So let me bring that up and I'll start. It's a bit of a whirlwind tour I'm going to take you on. Let me just minimize that. Here we go. A lot of you may think of me and know me as a cave diver or as an author or as the explorer in residence for the Royal Canadian Geographical Society. But tonight, what I'm going to share with you is all of the incredible wonders that we have in Canada. I call it Canada C4 because I think of Canada as having 4 coasts, not 3. So I think of the east, the west, the north, and then the Great Lakes St. Lawrence as another incredible coast. But before I really dive into these dive locations, I want to remind everybody that diving in Canada is about an incredibly vibrant community. And while we're all isolated at home, these people are, facing the challenges that lie ahead to keep their dive shops open. And so I'm thinking about all of my friends across Canada, coast to coast to coast to coast, who have these shops and offer such a remarkable service to their community through educational programs, through outreach, through getting into the classroom, through doing cleanup dives and picking up the litter out of our hidden geography. Oh, here's a favorite picture here. This is a zombie apocalypse dive in New Brunswick with Kojo diving. And I gave Kojo diving 2 slides tonight because Joe George, one of our military members, is quite a remarkable guy, an instructor. And here he's teaching someone how to use a dry suit. But like I said, this is an incredibly vibrant community. We all stick together, and it's quite a family. And I look forward to getting back in the water soon with all of my diving friends across the country, and also some of my next generation of divers that are looking forward to getting in the water. We have so much to offer here in Canada. And if I was never able to leave this country again, I would be filled with incredible opportunities. I grew up in Ontario, a lover of the water from my earliest age, and I always wanted to be a diver. Today, I have a weird kind of hybrid career of underwater photography, filmmaking, scientific work, consulting, writing, speaking, all kinds of things that keep me wet around the world. As Alex said, from weird dive spots like in the middle of the Sahara Desert or into the polar regions in the Arctic and the Antarctic. Sometimes you might even find me in weird places like inside a volcano in the Canary Islands. Caves are usually my special place. We don't have too many caves in Canada. We just happen to have one right near my home, but we have lots of other incredible places to dive. We have over 200,000 kilometers of coastline. 8% of our surface of Canada is covered by lakes. That's 9% of the world's freshwater reserves, but we only have half a percent of the global population. So we live in a country of great bounty. So let me start with the Arctic and take you diving up north. When I'm in the north, like when I was on the Arctic on the Edge expedition a couple of years ago, we were camping on the sea ice in Lancaster Sound and documenting that incredibly rich environment and also documenting some of the icebergs that come from the Greenland ice sheet, then travel across to Baffin Bay and get locked up in the sea ice. So these remarkable giants of ice offer us an opportunity to go diving. If you were to go north and see the sea ice, probably still right now, it would look about like this at Bylot Island. So it would be Baffin Island just below this map photo and Bylot Island above. So you would see, frozen cover on top of Bylot Island and then the sea ice. And then off to the right of the photo, you would see where the ice is starting to break up at the flow edge. As the flow edge breaks up each year, it sends all of that ice down the coast of Baffin Island, Labrador, and into Newfoundland. But at May, June, we can actually camp on top of the sea ice in these remarkable places that our Indigenous people call the land. So the sea ice is known to them as the land. And beneath the surface of that sea ice is a rich, vibrant biodiversity hotspot. This is the base of the food chain that you're looking at. This algae that's actually clinging to the underside of the sea ice. On top, you'll see polar bears and all kinds of other animals at the flow edge, seals, and this would be a seal breathing hole here that we're just looking at. And this is actually a seal breathing hole where a polar bear went for a hunt in the sort of top third of the picture in the distance. The polar bear hooked the seal, pulled it out, dragged it across the ice, buried it, interestingly enough, to conceal it from birds and things. It also defecated right there, probably again to stop other things from stealing his seal. And then he went off to another seal hole to grab a second bite to eat before coming back and getting his frozen dinner later. So our dive sites are on top of the sea ice itself and around these icebergs that have come all the way from Greenland, where we get some open water spaces around the edges of these great bergs. We also dive in the leads. These are natural cracks in the ice as the sea ice is breaking up. Some of them are a little bit jagged, but some of them are quite straight and quite angular looking. These are just naturally how the ice cracks and breaks. If we go out to the flow edge, sometimes it's sort of a jumbled mess, and then at other times it's quite linear as well, where the ice meets the ocean. And then other times we actually get these large icebergs frozen in the sea ice at the floe edge. In this case, we actually went out, got on top of this iceberg, looked around to see if we might be able to use this as the dive site. And literally within a few hours later, the floe edge had broken up and this went off into the ocean to float away. These days, camping on the sea ice can have its additional challenges because there's a lot of water on top of the sea ice. But on those perfect days at the flow edge, we can have an opportunity to be right at the location where all the animals want to be, like the narwhals, the belugas, bowhead whales. They come to that very edge because as it breaks up, it's kind of like a food buffet that they follow and they dive under the edge to hunt and then pop back out into the open water again. But as I mentioned, there can be greater challenges to both traveling on top of the sea ice and camping on the sea ice these days. Um, when I was shooting the Nature of Things documentary Under Thin Ice recently, we had quite a lot of water on top of the sea ice, and that made for, at times, quite uncomfortable camping situations, literally with water in our tents. Here's another one of the cracks in the sea ice. So again, they're quite straight, angular, interesting geometry to the ice. And underneath, we see all kinds of things from small jellyfish to much larger animals. When we dive under the sea ice, we dive tethered to the surface. So there's somebody topside on the other end of this rope that's clipped to my shoulder, playing out the line, and they're also tied into a titanium ice screw that's screwed into the to the ice as well, because we can get some pretty strong currents in these environments. Just to give you a sense, here's underneath the surface, looking up the edges of an iceberg. This iceberg here. Um, and here's another example, a big, tall chunk of ice. We get in at that little patch of open water, and beneath this iceberg is a whole new landscape. And if you look very closely at this photo, you can see a tiny diver in the bottom third of the picture, and that's my dive buddy. So that gives you a sense of scale and visibility. We're really interested in the ice conditions in the north because they're constantly changing and creating new challenges. I mean, things are changing faster in the Arctic than anywhere else on this planet. And, in the summertime in Pond Inlet, we can see, water cascading down the streets. And in fact, the elders in the community tell us that water pours out from beneath the ice in the community, even in the winter now. We also know that, animals like polar bears are spending 7 weeks more in water and on land instead of on the ice where they should be. So this is significantly disrupting the way and places that they're able to hunt and feed and teach their young how to hunt as well. In shooting Under Thin Ice, I actually got in the water with polar bears, something that I'm not sure that I will ever do again in my life. It is definitely something far more dangerous than cave diving. But being up close to these magnificent animals is just an incredible privilege. And to, see a mother bear teaching her children how to get around and hunt, it's incredible. To give you a sense of scale, that's a polar bear footprint by my hand there on the ice. They're pretty magnificent. Getting in the water with walruses can be quite dangerous as well. They roam around in packs. This is a mom and 2 of her babies, and they can be quite dangerous as well because they'll defend, obviously, their babies. Here's another location where we were camping up on White Island, not too far from Nauyat, and this is where we filmed some of the big polar bear action. Camping here, we're actually working out of a 24-foot moosehead canoe. Our Inuit guide is piloting the canoe and is also acting as a bear guard, trying to keep an eye on things to keep us safe. When we're up near Nauyat, we're actually camping in a small cabin instead of a tent. Here I'm with sharing a cabin with 5 guys. It's 100 square feet, 10 by 10. with one outlet to the generator to charge all our camera batteries and laptops and things. But it's a stunning, stunning environment. But for now, let's move away from the Arctic and let's move down the coast of Labrador and have a look at some of that. If you've ever had a chance to go by the Torngat Mountains, you will never forget the landscapes, the sky, and the incredible ocean environments that you have an opportunity to see. It's here that we see the sea ice and the icebergs that have broken up in the north after they've drifted down the coast of Baffin Island and moved down along Labrador. These icebergs will constantly morph and change. They're carved by the wind and by the sea as they roll and change literally hour by hour. But they are like biological engines. The sea life travels with them and also melts out of them. So nutrients that have come all the way from the Greenland ice sheet will feed the oceans as these icebergs melt. And so sometimes we have the incredible opportunity to see things like humpback whales underwater. In fact, soon we're coming up to the season when in Newfoundland you'll see the humpbacks feeding on the capelin. I had a really close experience with a humpback who, drew his tail fluke almost right across the dome of my camera. And literally moments after this photograph, he let out the most massive poop I've ever seen or smelled underwater in my life. I was swimming through literally, you know, probably hundreds of pounds of whale poop. But the seafloor in this cold water that's as cold as minus 1.8 Celsius looks like a tropical environment. There's a lot of color and an abundance of life that is incredible to observe. And if you're interested in seeing, more of the live video footage that would be a little bit too hard to stream right now, then I encourage you to go to CBC Gem, where you can stream my most recent documentary, Under Thin Ice, that aired on the Nature of Things this past November. It streams for free on CBC Gem, and there's also an app, a free app on both Mac and Android platforms called Discover the Arctic, where you can follow our journey, learn about climate change, and also about all of the animals of the north. It's quite fun, and it'll keep your kids busy for hours, which is a good thing these days if you're homeschooling. But from Labrador, let's continue down the coast to Newfoundland, a place where I've spent quite a lot of time. If we're just following the journey of the ice, then we've all seen these stories about in the springtime and early summer about how thousands of icebergs clog the shipping lanes at times and arrive in Newfoundland. It's a magnet for tourism and even for unusual uses. Like there are people that are bottling the water from these icebergs and even making beer and vodka out of icebergs. Me, I would prefer just to go look at them and dive around some of these beautiful, beautiful environments. The icebergs are changing even faster by the time they get down to Newfoundland. And when you take a boat up close to these big beasts, you can actually hear them fizzing. So they're dissolving and melting. Underwater, we can see them fizzing and melting and changing shape and form as we go. And if you ever want to go out and dive on these icebergs and see the incredible things that Newfoundland has to offer, then head out and dive with my friends at Ocean Quest Adventures in St. John's. They know how to do it better than anyone else. And as you're diving at these icebergs, you probably even get a chance to scoop up some ice and take it back in the evening to pop into your drinks for the night, which is kind of a cool thing to be able to do. Underwater, these are like sculptures to me. I think they're just stunningly, stunningly beautiful. But that's not the only reason that we go to Newfoundland. I'm just going to let this little bit of video play as I talk, and hopefully it'll stream okay. But we have other great surprises in Newfoundland. At times, we find things like this. This is a bloom of jellyfish at Terra Nova National Park. So we had jellyfish from the surface down to about 40 feet deep, literally millions of blooming jellyfish. These moon jellies don't sting, so we can actually swim with them, and it's almost like being in a bouncy ball room at IKEA. At least that's what it seems like to me. And as you dive in Newfoundland, here we go. You'll be going by some beautiful landscapes as well, like Bell Island. Bell Island is one of my favorite places to go, and for one of the reasons is to dive on the World War II shipwrecks that are present there. These shipwrecks are such an important part of our cultural history. They're also war graves and significant artificial reefs that have recruited an amazing bounty of life that is attracted to bond onto the shipwrecks themselves. For those that don't know the story, there were two attacks on Newfoundland in World War II in 1942 in September and November that sunk four ships that were carrying iron ore from the Bell Island mine. So U-boats twice raided this area where ships were loading with this important high grade of iron ore that was actually used in the shipbuilding effort. So they thought that if they sunk these ships, they could disrupt the flow of iron ore coming from the Bell Island mine. And as you can see, these ships had defensive guns. This is actually a stern gun on one of the sunken vessels. And now it's just spouting a beautiful array of anemones. So just incredibly beautiful. We dive on these places with a great reverence and respect and a complete understanding that these are still, the graves of many men. These were also the site of great heroism. The people of Bell Island rowed boats out to pluck men out of the sea and nurse them back to health on their kitchen tables. We also know quite a bit about the U-boat captain, Rolf Rutherberg, that sunk two of the vessels. And in fact, many of his personal artifacts have been returned to a museum on Bell Island, where you can see some of his photographs, his Iron Cross. So remarkable artifacts. He felt a great degree of remorse for these sinkings, according to his diaries. So these wrecks are really special, and there's been a great degree of healing between the families of the U-boat captain and the families on Bell Island, to share in this important history. This location in the Rose Castle, this Marconi room, this radio room, is the one that sort of gives me the pause the most as I dive in these sites, because I can imagine that someone would have been in this Marconi room radioing for help. Also from the Rose Castle, one of our dive team members, Luke Richard from the Magdalen Islands, from Saint Pierre and Miquelon, found the sextant for the Rose Castle. And since we thought that it was something that was so important to conserve and likely to be pilfered if left in place, we got a permit to recover this artifact for the rooms, the museum in St. John's. And so Luke here is recovering the sextant as we returned it to the museum. So these are really important wrecks, and they're important now also for the future of tourism in this area. The people of Bell Island have had many economic issues over the years, and great loss of their own men during the wars. And today, they're a fraction of the population that they used to be during the heyday of mining and then the heyday of cod fishing. They no longer mine in these mines. In fact, the mines themselves are now full of water, and with the RCGS's help, we launched an expedition to also explore the flooded mines associated with these wrecks. Some of the mines are at sea level today that you can actually walk into and see the remains of mining equipment. And that's pretty amazing. But you can also go into the mine in Bell Island and go on a tour of the dry portions of the mine and see it. But if you walk down the 650-foot slope, you will reach the point where the rest of the mine is flooded. And 9 square miles of mine are flooded 1,800 feet deep. And we can now swim through these passages and follow along in the industrial archaeology beneath the surface, the pipe works, the rails, the ore carts, the pumping systems that used to dewater the mine. And we can see all of these artifacts and also inscriptions on the wall, like this one that James Bennett would have painted with the soot from his cap lamp. We also find other inscriptions on the wall, like you might see this cross here on the wall, and that would have been a location where a miner lost his life in the course of working in the Bell Island mine. 106 men lost their lives when these mines were operating. And so each one of these crosses has a story. But it's a remarkable place to see and a great opportunity for people who are trained as cave divers. Let's jump now to the Great Lakes and the St. Lawrence Seaway. This is where I learned to dive. I started my diving career at Tobermory, and my very first dives with GNS Water Sports, heading out of Little Tub Harbor to do some amazing shipwrecks. Today, if you go to Tobermory, you'll find that the water is stunningly clear, but it wasn't always that way, and it certainly wasn't that way when I started diving. This photo is a wreck called the Forest City, and this is about 130, 140 feet deep. But when I started diving, we would barely be able to see the shipwreck. In fact, 5 feet of visibility was almost exciting to us at times. But what's happened since I started diving are what you can see as little nubs or texture on this wreck. This is the sweepstakes. Those little nubs are actually zebra mussels that you can see a little bit closer here, and now quagga mussels. These little bivalves have completely filtered the lakes and turned them quite clear. Now, divers and photographers are really excited about that and the fact that we can now see great distances underwater. For many reasons, it's not great for the ecosystem, though, but it certainly has turned this into quite a tourist mecca as a result. But also in the Great Lakes, there's 6,000 shipwrecks. Some of them we find, this is a side scan sonar of a shipwreck that was new that I got to take the first photographs on in Lake Ontario. And many of these depths wrecks are quite deep in what we call technical diving range. This one over 200 feet deep. And it's just amazing to be able to be the first person to, go down and photograph the remains of these incredible wrecks. So there's still so many more to document in the lakes and in the St. Lawrence Seaway. But let me jump you next along to the west coast of Canada for some different kind of offerings. We still have wrecks like this one, the Capilano, which is also just covered in anemones. But I think of the West Coast. We know it as the Emerald Sea, but I think of it as just the place of such great abundance and color. So this is a Puget Sound king crab filling the frame, and he's just decorated with incredible color. We find, all kinds of fish and animals that seem to have no fear of us, and color encrusting everything, like these strawberry anemones all over the rocks. I mean, even the urchins are beautiful out west. It seems like everywhere you look, there is life, big and small. One of my favorite activities is to swim with the stellar sea lions and the California sea lions out west, out at Hornby Island. Norris Rocks is a favorite destination because before the herring spawn in February, These guys are really curious and anxious to play. They will, as you can see, sit on my head. They'll grab things. They'll try and steal your fins. It's kind of like a combination of diving with a pack of puppies, or maybe even closer to being in a bar fight. Because as soon as you roll off the boat, these guys just dive off the rocks and swim out to you, and they'll tug on your suit. As I said, they'll steal a fin. They'll feel everything with their mouth. They're like very orally fixated, and it's so much fun. It can be overwhelming at times, but it is really, really fun to be in the water with these animals. But there is so, so much more all across Canada, so much that I won't even have time to cover it tonight. I've had the honor of diving and telling water stories from every province and territory in Canada. So I've had a chance to, go to Yellowknife and do some cleanup dives with local divers, and even photograph, inland lakes in places like Manitoba, or jump into the Shediac River watershed, where I met women who were educating young kids about the watershed, or dive into some goop in PEI. I've had a chance really to do some remarkable things. The Saguenay River in Quebec, or even inland lakes in Saskatchewan. So we have diving everywhere in Canada, even out back from the Royal Canadian Geographical Society's building in the Ottawa River, or near my home in Carleton Place. As I said at the beginning, we can dive everywhere in Canada. We have such an abundance and a rich, vibrant community of amazing shops, and I hope that when, we're able to get back out into the water and open up from isolating a little bit, that everyone will focus on supporting all these local shops and people and diving local, because we have so much to offer. So I'm going to turn off my screen share here and come back up in person so that I can answer some of your questions and go from there. So here we are. I think you're still muted, Alex. I can't hear you. Yeah.
Thank you. I was
There
muted.
we are. Okay,
So
good. We're all
much, Jill.
together.
That was amazing. Incredible photos and incredible stories. I hear that there's been a lot of activity in the live chat, which is amazing. So we
Oh,
do
good.
have some for you. Um,
Great.
Mariah wants to know, what's the coolest thing that you've seen while diving?
Oh boy. Oh, that's so hard. Honestly, I think, that dive where I showed the tail fluke of the humpback whale was just an amazing day out. I was out with Rick and Debbie Stanley in Newfoundland and Cast Aubin, and we found like 100 humpback whales that were feeding, and we didn't even have time to put dive gear on. We mask, snorkel, and fins. We jumped in the water, and I remember poor Debbie didn't have a hood or gloves with her, and still got in the freezing water, and stuck it out for hours, because it was just such a remarkable experience as a mother humpback brought her calf by us time after time for hours on end. And that was a really special day.
Wow, that sounds absolutely amazing. Multiple people have asked, what's the cave near your home like?
Oh, okay. So there are 10 kilometers of cave passage, branching off of the Ottawa River. And it's not your average cave diving site. It's very difficult. It's very low visibility, very high flow, and it's not big, but it what it does is it kind of disappears, and then it pops back up into the river. It goes under islands in the river. It spans Ontario and Quebec, and there's 10 kilometers of passage. And I'm doing some exciting documentation work for Andre Martel at the Canadian Museum of Nature, who is a malacologist. So he's studying bivalves, and we have endangered species inside the cave. And freshwater mussels, I've come to learn from Andre, need a host organism to survive. So Lake sturgeon um, operate with these hickory nut mussels. The hickory nut mussels at the end of summer will they have no obviously they have no brain, they have no eyes, and they will grow from their own mantle a lure. So the lure looks like a little minnow with eye spots and fins, and it flickers and it attracts a lake sturgeon to bite at it. And when the lake sturgeon bites at it, it sprays its young, called glochidia, into the gills of the lake sturgeon. And if the lake sturgeon is young, it will carry them around for a while before its immune system spits them out and they start a new colony. If the lake sturgeon's too old, it spits them out too early. So it takes this incredible symbiotic dance to allow these hickory nut mussels to survive. So we have them in the cave, and that's incredibly exciting to document and survey. And Andre will be writing some scientific papers on this, which is really fun for me to be able to support. I love diving with a purpose, and that's a great one for me.
Wow, that is really cool and really bizarre.
Yeah, who knew that I would be like in isolation studying the sex lives of mussels, right?
It's
Yeah,
all in the life of an explorer.
right.
Well, that's a good segue to our next question, which came
Mhm.
from Marvin in the live chat. And he wants to know, what are your current and future projects?
Oh, wow. Well, like many of you, when all of this came to pass, my entire work life disappeared off the charts because what I do requires a lot of traveling and then also a lot of presentations and work in front of the public. And so, so many, well, all of my projects pretty much have been canceled this year, but that hasn't stopped me from writing and pitching new ones. So a lot of things are kind of floating out there in the air, hoping to get rescheduled when we open up. But I've had to miss out on some work in Micronesia, in Australia, Norway, a few other places. I didn't go to the Arctic this summer because we can't go to Nunavut because they are thankfully COVID free right now, and we want to keep them that way. We want to keep them in their own bubble. So maybe next summer I'll be back in the north again. But if I can only dive locally, then I'll keep working on the Ottawa River caves for Andre until things open up further.
Perfect. Well, hopefully
Yeah,
those plans are just deferred, not canceled.
I hope so. Yeah.
All right. So AJ wants to know, how do you handle safety concerns diving under slash near icebergs?
So diving in and around or under inside of icebergs, I was the first person actually to go cave diving inside icebergs in Antarctica back 20 years ago now. It's very dangerous because it's a constantly shifting and changing environment. And so I do have to accept a significant amount of risk in doing those kinds of dives. But through all of my time in the polar regions, I've kind of learned to look at and assess ice in a way that lets me pick the safest possible options, I guess. But we wear helmets. When we want to dive near an iceberg, we get in the water far from the iceberg, like far from the zone where something could fall and hit us. We descend and then we swim to the ice underwater. And then when we want to come up, we swim away from the ice and surface distant from the ice. But the icebergs bob up and down and create upward and downward currents. Plus, we get mixing fresh and salt water that creates strange buoyancy considerations. So it's quite challenging diving. It makes you feel like a beginner all over again. But in order to do that kind of diving, we do have to accept a significant amount of risk. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Our next question comes from someone I think you know, Michelle from our education team.
Oh, yay. Hi.
Watching. Great. So
hmm
Michelle wants to know, how do you go about getting to know a new place and its wildlife when you dive in a new place for the first time?
Oh, that's great. Um, almost everything that I end up doing is new. I mean, that's what exploration is, right? If somebody had been there or if someone had already done it, we wouldn't need to write the handbook. So I do as much research as I can. But what's more important than anything else is the team. So the people that I work with, I don't need the very best experts and practitioners. What I need is people who are really versatile, open-minded team workers, because every day we're researching, we're studying, learning about the new environment before we get there. But then once we're doing something new, every day is a lesson. And we have to be able to sit down at the beginning of the day and say, okay, that was a little scary. How are we going to do this better? How are we going to do it safer? Is everybody comfortable with this? And we have to be able to agree and disagree and come up with solutions together. So it's really about the team more than anything else. A team of curious, open-minded, versatile people.
It's great. Sounds like Cangeo, actually. We'd love
I
to accompany you.
It is. It absolutely is.
Okay, Janet wants to know if you had only one dive left, or I guess if you could only make one more dive, where would you want it to be?
Boy, that's really tough, but I really think that if it was my very last dive, I would go out with the, sea lions. Take me away. Take me to your leader 'cause, you're doing pretty well, obviously. They're just so happy. I mean I come out of the water from a sea lion dive absolutely giggling. Last year, I had a young one with quite sharp teeth bite through the shoulder of my suit. He didn't injure me, but he did puncture my, $3,000 dry suit and flood it with cold water in February in BC. And I stuck it out as long as I could, just because it was too much fun.
Oh, I think that was my favorite part of your presentation. They were so cute. They
Yeah, they're pretty
really do
amazing.
look like puppies. Like they're just
Yeah,
so keen.
yeah, they are, they are.
So speaking of cold water,
Mm.
Durrell, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Durrell wants to know, how cold is the water near Bell Island?
Okay, that might be Daryl from Niagara Divers, maybe. Shout out to my friends at
Okay,
Niagara Divers. Um, in Bell Island, I've actually seen like I tend to go early in the season, so it can be 0. But later in the season, it gets a little bit warmer and warmer towards the surface. But don't well, if it's Dural, Dural's dived in that piece of cake, no problem, and it's worth it. It, it's a lot of the diving opportunities that we do have in Canada are very cold, but with the right gear, you can be comfortable and enjoy it. If you can dive in Canada, you can dive anywhere in the world. I truly believe that Canadians are the best divers out there.
okay.
Yeah,
So it's 7:42. How are you feeling, Jill? Do we want to
I'm
take?
great. Yeah,
Okay,
go for some more questions. I'm fine. Yeah.
awesome. So Shelly wants to know, you've mentioned witnessing changes in polar bear behavior.
Hmm.
What kinds of changes have you observed in other animal populations?
Oh, wow. First with the polar bears, I saw some pretty skinny bears in some of my travels. Although up in the Fox Basin, I saw such an abundance of bears. They seem to be doing quite well up there. Um, but there was one, really sad thing where I was watching a transitional bear, which was probably on its first hunt. After its mom had left it on its own to survive and thrive, and we followed and saw it for a couple days in a row. Well, it was following us. It was really predating on us. Um, and I was very, very concerned. We like the Inuit guides thought, "Oh, this polar bear has to win soon, or it's not going to make it." But we watched it catch 2 seals, so it did make it. So that was kind of a nice thing. But there's a lot of changes, things like, bowhead whales and humpback whales used to arrive in the north staggered by a couple of weeks, and as the flow edge is kind of, breaking away and dissolving, as I said, it's kind of the buffet, and so different species arrive at different timings to feed on things. Well, now the humpbacks and the bowheads seem to be coming at the same time because of some of the changing temperatures. We don't know, like, will they deplete the food stocks? Is this a problem? We simply don't know. So the timing of different animals is changing dramatically. Some of the species that are arriving are coming northward. And so it remains to be seen how how this will affect all of these animal populations, in the short terms. It's just change, and it's happening so fast that it's almost too fast for the traditional scientific publication process. So a lot of the citizen science and observation is really important of these changing phenomena.
Wow. This next one, I'm really glad that Marvin asked this actually, because I forgot to mention when I was introducing you that you were our inaugural explorer in residence at the Royal
Hmm.
Geographical Society.
Yeah.
Marvin wants to know, what does that entail?
Well, the funny thing is I'll tell you the story of when John Geiger called me, and said, "Jill," well, first of all, I'm standing in the middle of the woods getting ready to go on a cave dive, and I'm talking to him, and he said, "Jill, would you be our first explorer in residence? National Geographic has them, and we want one, and we don't exactly know what it is, and we don't have any money, but would you do it?" And I'm like, "Sign me up. This is great." So it's an honorary appointment, and now we have several explorers in residence, and so we're kind of like the ambassadors for geography and exploration, and we all have our own, explorations that we do. And I asked John, he said, "What would you like to do with this title?" And I said, "More than anything, I want to be the woman that wished I had met when I was 10. I want to go to classrooms across the country and meet kids and talk about exploration and geography and how we hit the jackpot living in Canada." And so, with the help of the Garfield Weston Foundation, who came on with funding for that, I've been able to go to every province and territory, to a lot of remote locations, to schools, and talk to kids and inspire them to explore their world. So it's been an incredible honor for me, and I hope that my appointment never ends, because I want to keep supporting the society with outreach in that way. Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. And obviously, we're so happy to have you as our inaugural explorer in residence. And I know
Oh,
that, before
thanks.
this pandemic hit, you were keeping up a pretty busy schedule of those
Yeah,
engagements.
yeah, yeah.
Great.
No, it's a great honor to work with everybody in the society, and I see the results of what, especially CanGeo education does in the classroom. All of the resources that are offered to teachers across the country free, and now all of these extended virtual resources too, are so valuable. And here's my pitch: please support CanGeo and the RCGS and their continuing efforts. This kind of funding for educational materials and support and curriculum support materials doesn't exist in other ways. These teachers need this, and to be able to offer it free is absolutely life changing to the kids that I've met.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much, Jill. And I'll
Mhm.
just jump in there and say that if you have been moved by Jill's plea for help, you can donate to the society right in the chat in YouTube. I think Angelica will type some instructions if you're looking for that. Or you can make a contribution on our website, cangeo.ca/donate. We would super appreciate the support. As Jill said, we really rely on all of you guys to be able to deliver this programming, not just this one-off virtual chat, but all of the resources that we provide for free to teachers across Canada, and through our new online classroom, which is another great thing that you should check out if you haven't already. If we've got time, I have
Yeah,
one more question.
sure. Go for it.
So I'm not actually sure who asked this, so sorry if you gave your name and I just missed it, but someone wanted to know, how do you mentally prepare for diving in some of these really remote, isolated places? And then as I guess a follow-up from me, how is that helping you cope with the current situation,
Oh,
with
yeah.
isolating at home? And
Mhm. I mean, some of the dives I have to prepare literally years in advance, training to do something new or do something in a new way. But before I get in the water on any dive, I sit down and I literally pre-visualize what is the worst possible thing that could happen to me. And I work through those mentally and say, okay, well, if this happens, I might have to reach and turn off this valve and switch to this and do that. Um, but before I jump in the water, I ask myself, am I capable of self-rescue? Am I capable and willing to execute a buddy rescue? And if the answer is yes, then I can get in the water. And if the answer is no, then I shouldn't. But, inevitably, still, when you get in the water, sometimes things can terrify you. Things happen that are unexpected, and boom, suddenly the terror hits. And in that moment, I have to take a very deep cleansing breath and literally tell myself, emotions, you won't serve me well right now. I might be trapped inside a cave, unable to see, holding on to a guideline. My life support is failing, and this has really happened to me. and and think that I might die, but I have to take the emotions out of it. I can't possibly visualize the big answers. I can't possibly visualize how it's all going to end, but I always know what the next best step forward is. And I find myself doing that a lot today. There's some days when the news just overwhelms me. Today, I felt really vulnerable and tender, hearing all of the news out of Nova Scotia. I'm like, oh my gosh, what else can possibly happen? This is horrible. And I have to take a deep breath and send away the emotions and just go, okay, well, what's the next best step? Well, I don't know, I honestly don't know where the next paycheck's coming from, but I do know right now I can use Justin Trudeau's CERB to do things like this. Reach out to the world, right? I could just get up and try to do something positive for my fellow Canadians every day. And as I move forward and as things open up, I'm going to focus even more on this great country of ours and the amazing diving community out there, and try and shop local, live local, support my fellow people, and just take the next best step forward.
Awesome. Well, Jill, thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure. I feel like the hour has just flown by listening to your stories. Thank you, everyone who tuned in. This was our first ever virtual CanGeo talk. I hope you enjoyed it. Definitely feel free to give us some feedback in the chat. And don't forget, we have our first ever CanGeo Trivia Night coming up next Tuesday, May 5th at 7 p.m. also on YouTube. So look for details about that on our website. And Jill, thank you again, and take care. Everybody stay safe,
Thanks.
and we'll see you soon.
Awesome. Thank you.